Senator, thanks very much for joining us. I want to go through some of the politics, what's going on in this race for the White House, some of the substantive issues, why you're here in Washington today, North Korea, Iran, Iraq, some of these other issues. Let's talk politics. First, though, you said last night to your supporters you did not do well in that Republican presidential debate last Saturday night. Explain, what was your mistake?
Well, unfortunately, it created a distraction that didn't allow us at the end of the campaign there to close with our message, because everybody wanted to talk about the fact that I said the same thing a couple times. And it was a mistake in the sense that, you know, what I was trying to avoid, Wolf, is a kind of an inter-party fight. I don't like Republican on Republican violence in these debates. If there are policy differences, we should discuss them. And so I tried to pivot out of that and just go back to the core message. One of the things I always drive is that I believe the president and what he's doing now is not accidental. It's a deliberate effort to achieve change in this country in a way that's negative. And I said it a couple times, and it played into what the other guy was saying, and so it created a problem. And the media just focused on that because I created that situation. And so I just felt, you know, my people there worked so hard on the ground, and I wanted them to know they did everything they could. That was on me, and we're going to correct that, and next time we'll be even better. And
you promised them it would, in your words, never happen again. Jeb Bush, you know, he's gone after you, as you well know. He said you repeated that can phrase a few times. He says you're not ready to be president of the United States, and that performance at the debate validated your weakness, the weakness of your campaign. Your reaction to Jeb Bush?
Well, look, Jeb is trying to say whatever he can to get an advantage. The fact of the matter is Jeb has no foreign policy experience, none. He just has no foreign policy experience, and he was governor a long time ago. The world has changed a lot in the last 10 years, and foreign policy has changed a lot in the last 5 years. And no one on that stage has more experience or has shown better judgment or a better understanding of the national security threats before this country than I have. And I hope we'll have those conversations in these debates. And I think it's important to remember we've now had 8 debates. And but for that one moment that created this distraction, I've performed very well in each of those debates, and I think the polls prove that, and people's reaction to them, and the coverage proves that. So I think we have to have some perspective here. You know, Governor Bush spent a lot of money in New Hampshire and finished basically tied with me and Ted Cruz, despite spending a record amount there. Obviously, he's still in the race. He's going to go to South Carolina. We'll see how things play out, but I feel really good about our team in South Carolina.
Your spokesman told CNN yesterday that the longer Jeb Bush is in the race, the more likely Donald Trump gets the nomination. Do you want Jeb Bush to drop out?
Well, look, every candidate will make their own decision. The time will come for everybody to make that decision. And from my perspective, we're going to be the nominee. It's just going to take a little longer. Look, Donald Trump did very well last night, and I called and I congratulated him. But 65% of the voters in New Hampshire chose someone else. As long as that 65% is divided up by 4 or 5 people, he's going to continue to be in first place. Once the race narrows, as it has begun to do so already, those that don't support Donald Trump will begin to consolidate around a fewer number of choices, and then I think we're going to start to see the real nature of the race. But as long as there's 5 or 6 people still running, I think Donald benefits from that, no doubt about it.
How did that phone conversation with Donald Trump go?
Pleasant. I get along just fine with him. I mean, look, I get along with all these people running. For me, it's not personal, and I really don't want to be in a position where I'm attacking other Republicans. I'm more than happy to discuss policy issues. I think those are valid.
Ted Cruz says he doesn't have the temperament to be commander-in-chief. Do you believe he has the temperament, Donald Trump, to be commander-in-chief?
Well, I think that's an open question. You know, I think certainly to be commander-in-chief requires you oftentimes to have to choose between 2 less than ideal choices. It oftentimes requires you to do things in a way that's very calm and collected and cool, not emotionally driven. And so Donald's going to have to show that. As we get closer, this race narrows and people begin to ask those questions. I think he's going to have to prove it, like we're all going to have to prove it. There are open questions about that, no doubt about it. I think the bigger issue is he really has failed to outline any concrete policy proposals on foreign policy. And being commander-in-chief is not just a huge issue in South Carolina. It's the most important job a president will have.
The New Jersey governor, Christie, as you know, he dropped out of the race today. He had been hammering you now for several weeks. He called you the other day the boy in the bubble. What's your reaction to Christie's decision to suspend his campaign?
Well, look, I like Christie very much, and I respect him, and I don't agree with him on some policy issues, but that's normal. I think Chris was someone who somehow concluded that attacking me would help him in his campaign. Obviously, it didn't work, but I don't think that was personal or in any way hold it against it. I think he's very talented, very likable, and I think he has a future in public service beyond what he's doing now in New Jersey. I expect to be hearing from Christie for many, many years.
But he really went after you, Senator. I mean, I'm surprised to hear you like him. I wouldn't like somebody who attacked me like that.
Well, again, Wolf, I mean, you've been covering this for a long time. I mean, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama went after each other even worse, and she ended up being a Secretary of State, although a very bad one. So let's keep some perspective here. Campaigns are competitive processes. People say things about each other in a campaign that ultimately doesn't translate to the personal. I don't take these things personally. I just don't. At least not what happened here. He was trying to win, and he was being a competitor, and I understand that. But it's not going to change how I feel about him.
It's interesting you say that, because you're absolutely right. There were some angry words between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama when they were running back in 2008 for the Democratic nomination. He got the nomination. He became president, invited her to be Secretary of State. Could you see yourself, if you were president, let's say inviting Christie to be in your cabinet?
Well, it'd be presumptuous to talk about anybody in that way, but what I've said about Chris and others is that we have a very talented party. I mean, who do the Democrats have? They have nobody. The two Democrats running for president, Bernie Sanders, a nice guy, an avowed Democratic socialist, and Hillary Clinton. That's all they have. Where are the, look at the diversity of the Republican field this year. A legitimate candidate running for president who was a woman, a neurosurgeon, a successful businessman, 3 or 4 very successful governors, 4 very successful governors, or 5, Mike Huckabee as well. 3 U.S. senators, 2 Hispanic Americans, an African American. We are young, we are diverse. Look at the talent in the Republican Party. Absolutely there are people that could serve in multiple roles. The Democrats have nobody. Where are the 45-year-old up-and-coming Democrats? And by the way, where are the moderate Democrats? There are none left. It's become a radical left-wing party.
What's your new strategy in the aftermath of New Hampshire, in the aftermath of last weekend's presidential debate?
In terms of the debate?
No, in terms of your strategy going forward.
Well, we have a great look. We're going to continue with our message. Our message is not going to change. I find it, it's interesting. We've now in an environment. It used to be where if you changed your message too often, you were accused of flip-flopping, and now if you're on message too often, you're accused of repeating it. So we're going to stay on message. I think the difference in the race now is when you're in Iowa, when you're in New Hampshire, you try to reach as many voters as possible one-on-one. I mean, in Iowa, less than 200,000 people caucus. If you can get 30,000 of them, or 40,000 in my case a week ago, to caucus for you, you have a very strong showing. So you want to meet with people one-on-one. Now, half a million voters are probably going to, half a million votes will be cast in South Carolina. So we'll still meet with people and try to touch as many voters as we can personally, but you're going to have to do a lot more through media coverage, and that's why I think you're going to see us engage a lot more of the media so we can reach voters that way.
Senator, we have a lot more to discuss. I want to take a quick break. I want to resume this interview in a moment, much more with Senator Marco Rubio right after this quick break. We're back with Republican presidential candidate Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. He's a member of the Intelligence and Foreign Relations Committees. Senator, you've just voted on a bill to impose yet more sanctions on North Korea. Here's the question, as someone who, like myself, who's been to North Korea, is this going to really stop North Korea's nuclear proliferation, more U.S.-led sanctions?
Well, first, it's not just geared at the nuclear weapons, it's geared at the ballistic missiles and at its cyber activity, and it actually allows us to expand designation beyond just the government to also designate specific individuals that are responsible for allowing them to move forward on these projects. The people that are selling them material. I actually added a provision to that bill, which is very important. It allows us to sanction individuals that are providing raw material, things like aluminum and copper, the kind of raw material components that they need in order to be able to pursue both their nuclear program and their ballistic missiles program. It also allows us to sanction individuals that are selling them cyber technology that they're using for cyber warfare, like what they did to Sony Pictures about a year ago, or at least alleged to have done in terms of that. So these are important provisions, and it allows us to expand the scope beyond just the government to the people around the world, including many, by the way, who live in China, who will now be subject to visa bans and having their assets frozen in U.S. financial institutions if they are part of the network that's providing North Korea these resources. Is
there cooperation between North Korea and Iran as far as missile technology is concerned, or nuclear technology for that matter?
Well, I mean, there's been some open source reporting in the press about potential cooperation. What I do believe is that the day may very well come where North Korea is more than willing to sell even a developed nuclear warhead to Iran. I think that day could easily come. In fact, there are indications that in the past North Korea has looked to proliferate and sell some of component parts of a weapon to other nations. I mean, this is a country with no economy. I mean, they're governed by a lunatic, but they have no economy. And so they're looking for any sources of resource, and this is not a nation that in any way under this leader feels obstructed from doing things like selling nuclear components to terrorist organizations and or a rogue nation state like Iran. So there's been some reporting in the open press about potential coordination, and I think that's a matter of concern moving forward, especially on the ballistic missile component part of it. On that, I think there's clear coordination.
Do you know if there were any Iranian observers in North Korea for the launching of this missile, of this satellite, the other day?
Well, let me just say, I think I've seen some open source reporting about that in the press. I haven't seen anything that confirms that. I know there have been in the past, and that's been widely reported in the press and open sources.
Well, we do know that North Korea helped Syria build its nuclear reactor,
correct,
which the Israelis blew up back in 2007, and the North Koreans helped Pakistan develop its nuclear technology. How concerned are you that North Korea could help Iran, which has a nuclear deal now with the U.S. and other world powers, develop some sort of nuclear capability?
Well, that's what I said a moment ago. This is a country with no economy, so they're always going to look for how can we generate resources, how can we generate money and revenue. And so one of the things that I don't think is beyond them is to go as far as...
Is there any evidence they're doing it?
Well, again, I'm just going to limit myself to what I've seen in the press and open source reporting, and there's been some indication of that, but I don't think there's any clear indication in open sources yet of that happening. But that doesn't matter. That we know enough about the North Korean government to know that it is something they are capable of doing, especially at the right price. And in fact, I have often said that I believe that Iran will eventually buy or build a nuclear warhead to attach to their own ballistic missile programs, and the only nation I know that would sell them one, at least now today, is North Korea.
A quick question on ISIS right now. You heard the testimony from the Director of National Intelligence, General Clapper, and others saying they fully anticipate ISIS could launch an attack on U.S. soil this year. If you were President of the United States, what would you do about that? Well,
this is a complex issue that involves us to approach it in a number of ways. First, I've already said we're going to have to change the entry immigration system for this country. We're not going to be able to continue to do things as we have in the past. We're going to have to be tougher in screening people entering the United States. We're going to have to know more about people than we've ever known before. Second, I think we have to be on the lookout, even increasingly more vigilant about homegrown violent extremism. And that, I think, calls on us to not just preserve, but expand our intelligence gathering capabilities. You know, we have a very difficult issue now with encryption technology, where you have individuals communicating on encrypted devices that no government agency can look into. That's how good they are. That's a challenge we're going to have to work with Silicon Valley to overcome. But the third and the ultimate best thing we can do is wipe out ISIS's core. In essence, they are using their core, their presence in Syria and in Iraq to be able to, as a place to generate propaganda and generate fighters, foreign fighters, and also to make people extremists abroad, like here in the United States. They need to lose these safe havens. And that means targeting them more extensively in places like Iraq and in Syria. I think that will require a combination of an Arab Sunni army to confront them on the ground, with help from our special operators, but increased precision airstrikes to take out their ability to coordinate and operate from these safe havens. And I think Libya is increasingly one of those places as well where ISIS, in fact, I've been warning about that for over a year and a half. It has become a predominant place for ISIS to recruit foreign fighters, but also to carry out propaganda. They need a place to operate from. We have to deny them those spaces.
One final question. I know you got to run. You did well in Iowa, not so great in New Hampshire. How are you going to do in South Carolina?
Oh, we feel great. We have a great team there. This is a state that's very strong on national security and on the military. I have as good a record, if not better, than anyone else in this race. It's a conservative state with a conservative closed Republican primary. I'm as conservative as anyone in this field, but I'm the conservative that can win, the conservative that can unite the Republican Party, grow the conservative movement, and the one Hillary Clinton doesn't want to run. That's why she attacks me more than they attack any other Republican. So we're excited about South Carolina.
Senator, thanks very much for joining us. You're welcome to come back to the Situation Room whenever you have some time out there on the campaign trail. We'll stay in touch.
Thanks, Wolf.
Marco Rubio is the Republican presidential candidate. Let's take a quick break. Much more news right after this.